Did Merv the last year he was on the air? You know? I've had a career. Don't lump me in with those 80s comics. I'm still working.
Dice was the guy he was the first comic to sell out Madison Square Garden. You know, I mean, Steve Martin was, I guess, the first guy to do arenas.
Right. And Robin.
And I know we're missing, so save your tweets like, you fucking forgot. We know we forgot. We're just trying to keep it linear and moving forward.
Dice was a force of nature.
He still is. I saw him at the Laugh Factory try to work clean, and I said this a couple podcasts ago, but it's a story that you will enjoy so much. Barry Katz and I were talking about when people get stuck in a character. Excuse me. And Barry said the audience grows tired of that character. And we got in an argument where I said the person gets sick of the character. Like Bobcat Goldthwait's been trying to not scream for 12 years. But that's all anybody wants to hear him do. And like Dice Clay, people want to see him go, you sucking fucking piece of garbage.
Yeah, but don't you think that's really Dice? That's a part of Dice, whereas Bobcat was kind of a...
I do think it's a part of Dice, but then you see him with his son, and I don't think he's telling his son, like, drag your fucking balls across the face on prom night.
So if you did a reality show about Dice's life, do you think he would turn on the character?
I think he had a reality show.
Did he?
And he kept driving back and forth past Giant Stadium with the camera in the passenger seat going, I'm going to sell that out soon.
Okay.
And as Anthony Cumia from the Opie and Anthony show goes, I just sold out the garden. The Olive Garden. Who wants fucking breadsticks? But we got in this whole argument. I said, Dice, I saw Dice getting trapped in his character. He was at the Laugh Factory trying to work clean. And he did like 8 minutes of clean shit. And I'll give a super truncated version. He goes,
was it good?
It was fascinatingly good.
Yeah, someone told me they saw Dice working clean, said he was terrific.
But the audience was so uncomfortable because they're like, holy shit, it's Dice. No cigarette. He goes up there in blacks that don't match. And he goes, my kids want to go to the park, right? They're like, hey, Dad, let's bring our bikes to the park, all right? You know, you got to get the bikes to the park. Put them in the van. It's a minivan. I'm the Dice Man in a minivan. It don't look right. And I put the bikes in. I scratch my arm. There's grease on my pants. And it takes an hour and a half because, of course, there's traffic. There's traffic. There should be traffic on the way to a concert or a ball game, not to the park. And he gets to the park and he goes, and the kids fly out of the van. You know where they go? The seesaw, the swings. And I go, oh, what about the bikes? And then no one laughs. He looks down at the girl in the front row and goes, you big-titted animal! Suck it, you cum dumpster! And the place explodes, and that was it.
Well, I'm just glad I didn't have that character. And I can play the smaller clubs, make a minimal amount of money.
Yeah, but
who wants that?
Your shelf life is way longer if you're just you.
Yeah, absolutely, and you don't do political material.
Right.
Now, it worked out for Mohr, but
and
a lot
Will
of...
Durst, I guess there's always a home for guys like Will Durst up in San Francisco.
But, yeah, because he's talking about contemporary politics. There's still guys out there doing Mondale jokes, you know, and, you know, Iraqi war jokes. It's just not good.
I mean, his nickname was Fritz. That should have been our first sign of trouble. Like, really? Mondale jokes?
Yeah.
So Johnny and you did not do the Tonight Show.
No, I did do the Tonight Show, but it's part of the one-man show. I don't want to give it up because it's
all right.
You know. But
this is exciting that you have a one-man show because you probably have more stories than the last 18 guests we've had combined.
Yeah, because I've been around longer.
You're an OG, man.
I got into the comedy game in the early 80s, right when it took off. Had no idea, and those were glorious times because we all knew we were in something. We all knew, wow, this is going somewhere. And, of course, the mountaintop very early was Johnny, and then Dave came along. So that's what you geared for. But everyone cared about being a really good comedian. You know, yes, you wanted a sitcom. Of course, you know, I got a talk show out of it. I didn't want a talk show, but
You're full of shit. You didn't want to talk.
No, I didn't want a talk show.
Why did you take it?
Because it was there. Because I had the opportunity. You don't pass
it up. It's like
that
Kurt Cobain. Well, we never really wanted to be famous. You go into the business for pussy and fame.
Well, but you also want to be good. You want to connect with an audience.
Once
you work the B clubs in New York in the early 80s, and in the early 80s, New York was ugly, and it was broke, and it was mean. And you want to get over that hump of connecting with an audience. You wanted to be a great comedian back then. You know, and of course I wanted to act and stuff like that, but I had no, a shitcom to get on, some kind of.
Is that what you guys called it?
Yeah, that's what I called it.
No, I mean back in the '80s, did other people go like, "What are you gonna do? Get a shitcom?"
No, that was I coined that. I've heard nobody else say that.
You got to copyright it, like Pat Riley copywrote Three-Peat.
Yeah, no, some kid now just copyrighted it out there on the internet.
Yeah,
Yeah,
shitcom?
it's gone. Shitcom, it's gone. But back then the only thing Cosby came along and saved it, the sitcom. But getting back to what we're talking about, comedians, yes, we all wanted to be famous and stuff like that, but we wanted to be really good comedians. We wanted to get on Carson. We wanted to learn the craft of really killing a crowd consistently and building good material. And nowadays, comedians, some of them want to be good comedians, but they want something else. They want a podcast. They want to be famous. They want to be
all right,
Daniel
lay
Tosh.
off.
What do you mean lay off?
Let me up. I had enough.
Yeah, I'm not talking. When I say young people, I'm not talking about you.
You're talking about some 41-year-old middle-class hack.
No, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to guys in their 20s.
I understand. Here's where I'm going to compliment your entire you and all your peers. You guys were the tip of the spear. You said you guys wanted to be great comics. You didn't even know what you were doing.
No.
There was no people you asked me earlier, like, who was the guy? For me, it was always Carlin. Carlin was a constant in my life of, I knew that these were essays. It was Beckett. It was Yeats. It was something so set aside from comedy that I'd seen on like Star Search and Evening at the Improv. I knew it was a big deal when I saw him. Eddie Murphy, of course, was hysterical to me, and I was a child, so him just cursing was great. But also, I really loved. He introduced me a lot to like the comedy, and you're probably a huge fan of this. The comedy that happens off camera. Like when he says, Coco, the dog don't know his name, Eddie. Like, I have to imagine a dog looking at his father and going in the other direction. The joke isn't written.
Who did that joke?
Eddie Murphy. Like,
okay,
the dad going nuts. Like, you get a dog and you don't even want... And his dad's like Panamanian and crazy. Anyway, but Dennis Miller, the Off-White album, was the one that fucked my head up. And I went, oh, my God, I have a lot of work to do. Like, this guy really has honed... Like, I didn't know an act could be... like this, like a Gettysburg Address of funny.
Yeah,
Like
when Dennis came along, I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Here's a guy who really thinks and writes, and he doesn't have any gimmicks, I mean, he got into his patter later on, but that was all organic.
The second special, he sort of jumped the shark when he goes, "Someone stop me before I sub-reference again." And the minute that sentence came out of his mouth, you went, "Oh no, you're aware that."
But
Don't let us know that you know.
Getting back to Carlin was my guy coming up in the 60s with my dad. I'd watch Carson, watch Ed Sullivan. So I was seeing Alan King and Buddy Hackett and Don Rickles.
Oh, to be in Nagasaki where the women chew the backy and the men say, woo, wacky woo.
But then Carlin was with Burns.
Yeah.
And then he was, middle of the road comic. But then when the night he came out on Carson with long hair and a beard and jeans, it was like, and my dad goes, what the hell happened to him? and I'm sitting there laughing my ass off, and my dad said, "Oh, that's not funny." And so that's when it separated from me, when Carlin came out when I was in high school, and bought his albums. The first comedian I saw live. Carlin was.
Where'd you see him?
I saw him at the Miami High Life Fronton.
Oh, you're a Miami guy.
Yeah, I was raised in Miami. Born in St. Louis. That explains why I'm a Cardinals fan.
Yeah.
Raised in Miami. Went to Tallahassee, Florida State, and then moved to New York. But Carlin was our guy back then. See, Eddie was more of a peer. Not that I was a great comedian like him, but he had already, he was.
Well, you're still here doing comedy.
Yeah.
You haven't left to talking dog movies, so you really are. You were peers because you were comics.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put you up higher than you're putting yourself.
But you know what I mean. It was like when I came up, Dennis was a peer. I saw Stephen Wright do his set one night at the Improv, and I go,
amazing.
If this guy doesn't make it, this business sucks. 3 months later, I saw him on The Tonight Show. It was like, yes, this business works. That was
Katz had a neat point about Stephen Wright. He said he's the only comic that started at 1,200-seat rooms and was an A act, and just stayed. without doing stand up, without doing shitcoms,
Yeah.
without doing movies, and like right now he's at that exact. For 25 years, he's been the guy. Like, hey, go up to Foxwoods in the 2,000-seat room and see Stephen Wright.
Always quality and still funny and still good. I mean, when he came to the Improv, we sat in the back, and here's a guy, not in a monotone, but very soft-spoken.
Yeah.
He had it down. He had his material down. He had his persona down. It was like he blew a lot of comedians away.
His last time out, when he was doing his new stuff and he made the rounds, he did stuff that kind of like freaked me out because he kind of went into Dennis Miller-ish area as far as the language went. And then the absurdity of what he was saying, he always says absurd things, but it was like Carlin-esque. He did this whole bit about, I used to work at a planetarium when I lived in Toronto, and we had a softball team. We used to play against other planetariums in the area. And like right there, I hit pause on the TV and I went back, like other planetariums in the area just fucking made me crazy.
Yeah.
Like, well, which planetarium do you want to go to? Because there's Al's down the street. Then there's the one that Stephen Wright works, like, you know, like it's grocery stores. You want to go to Ralph's, Vaughn's, Gelson's, because there's a whole bunch of them all over. And then there's the other Ralph's down the street. There's the A&P. You can go to Food Town.
But that's the absurdity of it.
Right, but
He's always been like that.
So I kept rewinding that, and I realized I had spent like 14 minutes watching 40 seconds of speech because of its perfection. And I've only done that with Carlin. And I did a little bit with Cosby, to my brother Russell, with whom I slept with, where I would just go, wait a minute, this is too perfect, this language.
Oh.
And he goes, we used to practice inside the planetarium. Our first baseman would stand under Mercury, and our second baseman would stand under Venus, and our shortstop would stand under Earth, and so on. And then our first game, we had to forfeit, because when we were outside, we were all way too far apart. And I was like, that's bananas funny.
Yeah.
Like, it's so weird. Like, you had to... First of all, you never lived in Toronto. Like, why Toronto?
It's funny.
I guess.
Yeah, he just sits down. It comes into his head, and he writes it down.
And we used to play against other planetariums in the area. Like, there was a planetarian softball league. It made me laugh so hard. But the thing with Carlin was he was the guy that made me realize these were essays that he was doing. You could do this you could actually go to like a theater and do a George Carlin one-man show as a performance, I thought.
I saw him with rock bands.
Really?
He was on the bill with Spirit, Brownville Station. This is going way back.
Yeah, man.
And he came out and did an hour. And we were expecting AM/FM because it had been released.
Weather
And I was
forecast for tonight, dark.
And he came out and did an hour new, and you talk about 7,000 people laughing their ass off.
That's a
and that was
toughest
material
hustle, too, because no one's there to see him.
Oh, no. We were all there to see him.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
I thought you were there to see Spirit.
No. I mean,
Fuck Spirit.
I was a comedy freak, so I liked the music. The fact that he was going to be there along with these rock bands, and I interviewed Carlin years later when I did that talk show.
The Alan Havey Show.
Night After Night with Alan Havey.
All right.
And
let me finish.
I'm not daddy.
The Alan Havey Show that was called Night After Night with Alan Havey.
And he said that was one of the few times he ever did that, so he remembered that performance. And it blew me away.
How hard was it to interview him, or was it super easy once you got out of the fact of your head? Or was it easy once you got out of your head? Holy shit, it's George Carlin.
If I had done it 10 years earlier, I would have been, oh shit, it's George Carlin. But I had done stand-up about 10 years. I had done some Letterman, so I felt a little more comfortable, but I was still very excited and nervous that he was on the show. And he takes comedy took comedy very seriously.
Yeah, like a
Very
rocket
seriously.
scientist takes rockets
Yeah.
and atoms is how he would dissect it.
But he shot holes in the Catholic Church when I was a kid. You know, I went from Alan King, who I loved, mother-in-law jokes and stuff. Even when I was a kid, it cracked me up, even though I didn't understand the whole concept of mother-in-laws, to George Carlin talking about drugs and the Catholic Church. And this was my comedian. This is for me. He's the first comedian that was speaking to my generation. I dug that.
I talked his daughter Kelly is a good friend and a great podcaster. She's got a great podcast, Waking from the American Dream, if you guys want to check that out. And she said her father used to keep a notebook of just phrases he heard that made him happy. Like he heard somebody call someone else's mother when he was growing up a kraut cunt. And so at like 12, 13 years old, he just had a notebook and just on one page, on one line, it said kraut cunt. And underneath that, somebody was like, "Hey, some guy just got back from the army." He's like, "How'd it go?" He goes, "It's all right if you don't mind some asshole waking up and screaming fucking, I don't know what it was, blowjob and motherfucker in your face every time." And he would just write down whatever the exact syntax of that sentence was. And then at like 15, his mother found that notebook. Mrs. Carlin found that notebook and just thought her son was Damien.
Well, he went to a advanced Catholic school, a experimental Catholic school.
Yeah.
Where the desks weren't in order. You could do what you wanted. It's the kind of school I should have gone to when I was a kid because I was a Catholic. I was in Catholic schools up to community college.
St. Louis Catholic.
No. Miami. I was raised in Miami.
My